Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And we're back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down HR issues of the day, big or small, help you make sense of what they mean, and help you understand how they impact you and your organization. Joining me today is Rukmini Banerjee, Chief Operating Officer at Vouch, an insurance tech startup. Welcome to the show, Rukmini.
Thank you, Teri. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I know it's going on mid-month at this point, and I've been told it's past the date where you can say that. But since we haven't seen or talked to each other in a while, I want to say that to you.
A very, very Happy New Year to you as well.
Yeah. Rukmini and I were introduced a few years ago through a common friend when she was at another tech startup. And what she was doing there is going to be a little bit of the focus of today's conversation. So let's get into the huddle. Today's topic is focused on really fast growing small businesses. And there's a lot of you out there. And one of the big challenges for those small businesses is building an HR function. Specifically, we're going to talk more about what that looks like. We're going to talk specifically about moving off of a PEO, but some of the same steps apply if you're just starting from scratch, building your HR function. So if you don't know what a PEO is, it's a professional employer organization. It's basically a full service HR outsourcing organization or co-employment. So before we dive too deeply into this topic, Rukmini, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, particularly coming from an operations background and into HR. I don't think people realize how complex the HR function is until they get in the middle of it. So I'm interested, and I know people will be interested to hear your take on that.
Totally. Opened up my eyes, this being a consumer of HR. For the many years that I have been in an operations field, my entire career, God, that I'm so old, 25 years plus that I've been working, has been in operational fields across all of the various disciplines in operations. So building new teams, building new capabilities, scaling capabilities, divesting, integrating. I've done all of the different gamuts of operational stuff. And then when I joined this prior company as their chief people officer, that was my first time being on the other side of the HR table. And it absolutely opened up my eyes. What was interesting is the reason I jumped into it and I was interested, I have to give a lot of kudos to my CEO, who also took a risk in hiring an ops person for a chief people officer role, right? Was what the company was going through was immense level of growth. And with that, with this explosive employee growth, it is really an operational task in the initial phases of building out the function, of building out the capabilities, of putting in place processes and structures and systems that can scale and grow with the company. So it really, really helped to use the operational brain and the operational expertise. What I really needed support on was the HR technical part of the function, which I really didn't have. But that was fantastic learning for me as well. So it was a joyride.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I'm wondering, was there any sort of HR roles in place when you got there? Or did you build and hire all of the individuals that came in to operate into the HR function?
We had a PEO who did the bulk of the HR administration part. We had one HR generalist, very junior, also getting into the HR field. Her primary role was really being the liaison between the PEO and the organization. What we did have in place was a talent acquisition team. So recruiting was always in-house and outside of the PEO team. So we had 3-4 people in talent acquisition. We had one HR generalist, and the PEO when I came in.
And just for people's benefit, any of those small companies out there that are thinking about a PEO, while you were doing the hiring, they would actually do the onboarding, right? Because they would hire them as co-employment under their umbrella so that they could pay them and do benefits and all that good stuff.
Correct. The onboarding was them. We were like, even my offer letter was as an employee of the PEO in the offer letter. And they did a lot of the initial interface. But then one of the things we put in place early on was this company level onboarding as well, which was not the HR onboarding. It was more focused on learning the business. But the PEO handled all of the, where do you want to get paid and what benefits do you want to have and who are your dependents and beneficiaries, all of that stuff.
Right. It's a lot of work. And for organizations that, have 50 or more employees, this can become a lot of administration, a lot of things you don't know, from workers' comp and retirement and benefits and taxes and all the other components that go along with that.
Yeah, I think it's a huge, so beyond just the work effort that goes into it, which is a lot, it's not insignificant. There's a risk management component to this. Like when you're a small business and you're trying to build the business, the people who work for that company are working to build that business. They are not HR experts. They're not legal experts. They're not tax experts. So if we try to do that in-house when we're that small, I think there's a huge risk element of not getting something right and having big repercussions over time. So I think the whole PEO setup, I am a big, big fan of for that small-sized company.
Yeah, risk management is key, obviously. And I think they take a lot of that off of your plate. What were some of the things you really liked about that relationship?
So when I came in, we were 4 years in business. That's how long the PEO relationship was. There was a whole lot of trust. They were wonderful partners, absolute wonderful partners, even through the transition away from them. And I think that went a very, very long way in making this relationship successful. They had a very good, broad understanding of our business and therefore the employee base, because they understood the kind of employees we were attracting. Therefore, they could anticipate employee needs. Therefore, they were pretty good in their understanding of workers' comp stuff, in understanding the benefit plan and stuff. So I think that understanding was very, very key. They were very invested in our growth and success. And I think the PEO model is such, it was a very mutual, they knew at some point that we would outgrow them. So it wasn't like a contentious, we don't like you, therefore we are moving. It was none of that. It was, we are growing at a pace and we're at a point where even the PEO understands this is not to our mutual benefit anymore. Therefore, they were very, very invested in us landing on our feet successfully.
Yeah, and they really are designed for smaller organizations. I mean, generally, I think people start to look at moving away at about 300 employees, but I've seen organizations bigger than that still using them for 500 employees. But there is sort of that point, that tipping point, right, at which it becomes a better, more efficient process to run it in-house. What do you think that tipping point was for you? Had the decision already been made when you came, or did you help make that decision?
I helped make the decision. So the decision, just for context, I joined this company when we were about 125 employees. In the 2 years that I was with them, we were 700 plus. So that is the kind of growth that we were seeing, from 125 to 700 in 2 years, right? So when I came in and I saw the projections for the end of the year of that first year, that's when the numbers started going in that 400-ish employee range. And the PEO sweet spot was around that 300, 400. So that was the first trigger. And then as we started thinking, there were some other things that happened because we were talking the COVID years. So what used to be a company that was based out of one city, two cities in the Midwest suddenly blew up into this national organization. And the PEO was very, very suitable for us because they were in the same city where we had started. But that was one city, and their presence was very Midwest presence and not national. So we started to see divergence of employee needs and benefit needs across the company. So that was another reason where we started to see the gap growing. The other thing we realized is the employee relations and HRBP functions started to become more and more important and critical to us and more strategic over time as we were growing, because we were a Series C startup at that point. So Series C, Series D, we were starting to hire in senior VP level talent. And therefore, as they were building out their teams, the need to be much more strategic HR business partners, that need started growing, which the PEO struggles to fill. They're not designed to do that, right? So I think those were the three. One was the growth in employee size, one was the geographic spread, and one was the need to build out strategic functions that caused us to go, okay, it is time to look at the cost benefit and figure out how to approach this. The good thing was we were not rushed, therefore. We weren't at a point like, oh my God, in the next 2 months, we need to get out of this.
Right.
So plan this out. And that, I think, was very helpful as well.
Yeah, they're great for, when an employee has a problem with their payroll, they call the PEO, right? When it starts getting to the point where you're building talent and career planning and succession planning and performance management and all of the other things that really become critical in what you just described, you really have to have a function internally and really take on that capability.
For sure.
So, as you said, the pandemic was getting into full swing. You guys were kind of expanding globally, and the whole idea of work from home took on all new meaning, right? People wanted to work from their home state where you didn't have domicile. They wanted to all of a sudden work from other countries where you didn't have entities. It was a bit crazy for a while there, I'm sure. And as you described, that had played some role in the decision to move away from it. But I'm sure that impacted the process. It's challenging when the rest of HR life is still going on for employees, right? And so those things are happening at the same time you're trying to go through this big operational process. Talk a little bit about the impact that had on the process.
So I think our initial, if I think back on how it all started, the biggest pain point was access to employee data. That's what we started feeling first when you're with a PEO, because the HRIS is the PEO's HRIS. And really the way we were operating was downloads into Google Sheets. And that's our internal way of knowing who works here, who are the active employees, and information about them. So that was the first pain point, which got us to the first logical solution that we went to is we need an HRIS. That was the beginning of this journey. And then as we thought through what truly we need, we realized the nature of this work from home, the nature of this geographic spread. And yes, somebody wants to move somewhere else. What if somebody is domiciled, let's say in California normally, but chooses to go work from their parents' house in Nebraska for 6 months? What does that mean for state taxes and stuff? Like all of these complications and situations and where we are filed. Like I remember even then our PEO didn't have Hawaii, and we hired someone in Hawaii. So for that particular exception, we went, it's also a philosophical talent acquisition strategy that we consciously said we will go after the best talent, irrespective of whether it's easy or not to bring them into the fold. So I still remember Hawaii was our first time where the PEO didn't have a status there. And we had to just hire them on as a contractor till the PEO could file and get us into this process. So it's learning all of these different things and to have them put in place. So what we did was finally, when we started working with Sapient, and I think you guys were so amazing working through the process with us, was to split that HRIS stream from the whole benefit stream, because I think the kind of work was so different that we needed to focus on them in parallel, but separately and not all jumbled up together. And I think that was one of the smartest things we could have done at that point.
Yeah, I think it really highlighted the need for different work streams. And so if you think about how you started this process, you started down the path of, I've got to find an HRIS, right? And then the other pieces of that puzzle started to come together as you realize these are things that we've got to do in these other areas to make this work. And benefits is huge, right? I mean, that in and of itself, and given that you had people in so many different places, can't afford not to get payroll and benefits right. What were some of the other things in your process that really helped lay the foundation for getting this right? Because you guys did this pretty quickly. I mean, we started having conversations in March and April, and January 1, you were going to be off of the PEO and running your own independent HRIS as well as the HR function, right? So there's a process in that 6 or 7 months where you're really trying to think about, okay, what do I need to make sure I don't leave out? And who were some of the other people? Because I know we had the CFO and we had several other people in the organization that needed to be involved in this because it touched so many areas.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I actually think we took our time. We took like 6-7 months doing it, which I'm very, very glad we did. We didn't try to rush it. Who were the people from our end? I think one of the things, what helped us, one is I think bringing you guys in, Sapient in, was a very, very helpful move, primarily because of who I am and my expertise is not in HR. So understanding that, recognizing that, and bringing in somebody who has that HR expertise, I think is critical. So that was critical, number one. Number two was, I think, breaking out the work stream of going to search for a benefit broker who understands and can help set us up and give us what we need from a benefit perspective, separate from going after selection of HRIS and implementation of HRIS. Splitting those two out, I think, was second that helped us. From internally, I can't even remember, I was probably, what was the role? The sponsor of the whole thing. But I did have my COO and my CFO very, very engaged. And we were almost like a triad invested in. This was a huge process change from a financial, tax, accounting, obviously all of the HR kind of world as well, and employee change management as well, because they were very, very used to a certain way. And everything was changing, including benefits, including how the payroll will get calculated. So it was a huge change management effort. And I think recognizing that and understanding that was the third key factor. The fourth factor, I would say, and not every company may be able to do it, but if you can, I think that really helped us is we did not do this with a lens of cost benefit, of saving money. We did this because we believed in how much we would grow even in the future, and this was the right direction. And maybe year one, we didn't need to save money, but we knew in year 2 and year 3 we would. And I think that really helped us because our mindset was about putting this in the right way. So we increased the number of roles. We needed specialists in place. We hired a payroll and benefits specialist. We hired another HR generalist, or maybe even 2. I'm trying to remember now. Like we grew the size of the team, and we grew them a little before implementation so that they could get the benefit of understanding current state and be able to be there for continuity. And we didn't need to go, oh my God, all bunch of new people who don't know how it used to be, and therefore they can't translate what the employee needs.
That's a really good point. I think the idea of this being a cost savings exercise is just not even relevant for most people. It's a business imperative that just reaches a point where you need to do it in order to make the organization work and to really have the kind of relationships you need with your employees.
Think of it as no different than I'm starting a business. I need a marketing function. I need a sales team. I need a tech team. This was the time where we needed an HR team. We just didn't need it before, but it was at that point we needed. So we were building capabilities. And I think that mindset is very important. And it's very different than I need to save what I'm paying the PEO, which might take us down a different route.
Right. And you were a little unique. I think some organizations kind of reaching that point of moving off the PEO, they may not have the level of growth that you guys were experiencing. I mean, that was just phenomenal, which to your point, I needed extra specialists and more analysts to do work because we were going from 300 to 600, 700 in a matter of, months or, 12 months. So it was really just a phenomenal amount of growth. I think a lot of organizations, there's plenty out there that are experiencing that level of growth, but there's also a lot that are just kind of teetering on, hey, we're kind of too big for this PEO. What's it going to take us to move off of it and start our own HR function and add to our own HR function?
Yeah, which is, and I think the situation is different and the gap from what the PEO is offering is different. So even in my current company, we just transitioned off of the PEO, but it was very different. Our growth trajectory employee-wise is very, very different. It's much more stable. It's growth, but it's modest growth. It's not explosive growth from an employee perspective. And our PEO has a national presence. Our benefits has a national presence. We're a national company, so that gap isn't that big. So when we transitioned here, we literally just transitioned. It was very different. We just selected HRIS and moved off the HRIS, but we stayed with the benefits because it works for our employees. So what that does is, from a function capability perspective, we didn't need to grow as much as we had needed in my prior company. And the employee change management has been minimal. It's really been, and this is also an tech company. It's a tech company. So you don't need to really put too much change management into your portal to get into your pay stub is switching from A to B. So that's very normal for people. And the change management element has therefore been much less. So I do think this has been a very smart way to do it here. So part of this is understanding what your company's needs are and what your gaps are with the PEO to determine how big or small you want the change to be.
Yeah, I agree. And that makes a lot of sense. I think if people are looking for some words of wisdom, it sounds like take a look at the organization. Where do you have things that you could separate out from this process, right? Is benefits one of those things where you've already got a larger presence in the US or globally, and you don't necessarily need to attack these things at the same time because these are big jobs. Did you ever look at any of when you were moving to global, did you look at any of the employer of record type organizations? Because I know they're a little bit different in that outside the US, co-employment is not necessarily legal in all countries. So they literally need an employer of record. Was that something that you guys investigated?
We did. Our situation also was very fluid. So initially, we were thinking of global expansion, like setting up an office in a different country. That would definitely have needed employer of record. There was no other way to pull that off. Because otherwise, internally, we would have had to mirror and have another HR function set up, which for the first 3 employees there doesn't make any sense, right? What we ended up through the process through those 2 years was we deferred the global expansion, but we still had 1 or 2 employees, one who was based out of Canada, one who was based out of Australia. So we still needed to do that. And I think we ended up doing that with employer of record either way. But it was very different. It was just one person, let's figure out a contract. The contract was different because Employment laws are very different in every country. We actually had another employee who moved to Germany for a year or 2 years, I think, maybe a year. So we had to figure out, again, go down that employer of record path. But the benefit broker we had selected managed the benefit side of it, but we still needed employment contracts that were specific to the countries. And it's a very, very big process without employer of record. It's really, really hard.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And there's a big difference between when you start getting outside the U.S. between the PEOs and the EORs, as they're, I think, known. Because having that entity already set up in a country is pretty significant and a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, any other words of wisdom or things that, if you had to do it over again, you might do a little bit differently?
I think words of wisdom, I have shared what I think were the critical to success pieces. I think that's what I would go back to. What I would do differently is I think everything that I'm saying was really helpful for us. Most of it we fell into. Even working with Sapient, we actually started working with somebody else. The PEO had recommended first, which was, oh, you want to select an HRIS, work with this company. And we started there, and they had a very regimented process of these 6 steps or 7 steps, and it did not cater to us based on what we needed. And I think that was a learning for us. We had to do that for like 3-4 weeks and go, okay, this is not going to be helpful. What we need is somebody like Sapient who has the expertise in the field and has the flexibility to meet us where we are and where we need to go. So I think everything that I listed as critical to success, we came upon it through the process, which is why I keep saying having the 6-7 months was very helpful for us because it gave us the time. So if I were to do this all over again, I would just start there. These would be things that I would very consciously start with. Like we should separate out the benefits work stream from the HRIS work stream because it's very, very different and both are very, very complicated. So I think everything that we did all the right things. But if I were to redo this and rewind the time back, I would probably intentionally start there with we need ABCD.
Yeah. It's a lot of stuff. I think one of the things that we did that was really helpful was we built that calendar of all of the events, everything that was happening within HR that needed to happen, whether it was related to the benefits or to the HRIS implementation and the things that were going on within the business. So we knew when we would overlap with other things that might create some challenges for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the other things that we needed to do just because we were doing this. And that's the other thing. There is my advice to people starting on this journey is there is a real chance of scope creep because we're taking on such a big thing. What's the word? What we wanted to do at every step is, oh, we're changing this. Let's also look at this. Let's also fix this, right? We changed the employee book. Because we had to. It was the PEO owned and it was our chance. And now we wanted to put it in our own brand and in our own voice. And that became a very big piece of work. So there was a whole lot of peripheral big pieces of work. They were the right things to do because we were changing so much. Let's do it all right the first time. But I would say be intentional about that. Not everything has to be changed in one go. But some things do make sense because I think the employee handbook does make sense because it's no longer going to be a PEO shared handbook for X number of companies. It's going to be ours. So you can put your brand and your voice into it and build it out. So I think that would be the other thing, all the other peripheral work streams that we just tackled on as part of this.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think you made a point earlier that you had a really good working relationship with the PEO. And I think they keep in mind, I mean, they want you to succeed. They offer a lot of support and, checklists and things like that. So as you get into this process, work with them to help you because you'll probably need other help, but work with them because they'll be able to guide you in here are some things that you're going to have to do. and you need to have time to do them.
Yeah, it very, very good point, Teri, because number one, they're used to this process. They have companies who have transitioned out before, so they know what this looks like, even if you don't know what it looks like, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, they were critical in the testing of the data before implementation. Once we put the data into the new HRIS and we run the reports, the payroll reports, and whenever there's discrepancies, the PEO actually very, very quickly understands why. Oh, because we calculate tax here. Oh, we round off here. Oh, we do this addition here at this point, whereas you're doing it there. So I think that relationship with the PEO and being lockstep in with them, every PEO that I think by default is invested in this going well. If this doesn't go well, it's not good for the PEO either. So I think building that and working with them jointly on this is very important.
Yeah. And your benefits brokers can help you as well. I mean, that was another good source of information and support was through the brokers and those types. So, there's help out there. There's support. Don't try to do it alone. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show, HR We Have a Problem. I want to thank our guest, Rukmini. Thanks for being here. It was great to see you.
Thank you so much. This was actually a lot of fun.
We'll do it again. I was thinking about your current organization and just all these tech startups. So I'm percolating an idea about what we could talk about. So thank you so much. Thanks to our production team, Kelly, and the Brand Method Group. Thanks to Lisa and Zoe, our marketing team, who will put all this together and get it out there to you guys so you can listen to it. And thanks to our listeners in the community. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you'd leave a review if you have a minute. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Until then.